The Atlanta Braves split their Wednesday doubleheader against the Mets. And I think the question now is, does this make you more or less inclined to invest in this team at the deadline? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, a production of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com. Braves go 1-1 in their doubleheader against the Mets on Wednesday. Wild stuff in there. Didier Fuentes pitches in both games, which we'll get to. But the big takeaway coming out of this, right? You lose game 1, 3-2. You win the nightcap 1-0. We're 3-3 on the road trip, 8-5 since the All-Star break, 9 one-run games in that stretch. Now, thankfully, you won 6 of them. But I was asked on a recent radio hit if the struggles to score and this road trip has made me more or less inclined to invest in this team at the deadline. And I think it's a really interesting question. And I kind of want to, my expectation and everything we've heard from Atlanta is that they will add to the team at the deadline. And despite what the naysayers will tell you, every competitive team that Alex Anthopoulos has had in Atlanta, they've gone out and bought at the deadline, right? They didn't buy they technically did buy last year, minor, Tyler Kinley, whatever. But they add at the deadline when they are a contender. And I expect them to add this week. The question is, to what level do you invest, right? Because I think we learned from yesterday, there are promising parts of this team. There are some struggles and some questions. Let's talk about what we saw from AJ Smith-Shawver. Let's talk about all of that. But we're going to keep going with the offense here. Atlanta scored 13 runs on this 6-game road trip in regulation, right? In the first 9 innings of these games, they scored 13. And when you look at what happened yesterday, 14 hits on the day, 1 homer, 2 extra base hits. Matt Olson ended up accounting for all 3 of Atlanta's runs. And so what I kind of have to figure out here is, when it comes to the offense, how aggressively do you need to add to the offense? Because the point that I made the other day, and we saw this again yesterday, hitting left-handed pitching has been a struggle for the Braves. Sean Manaea, 2 runs on 5 hits. Both of those runs came the 3rd time through the order. And that's not a pattern you can assume you're going to be able to replicate in the postseason. You can't assume, our starting pitching will hold serve, and when we get to the 5th or 6th inning and we're facing that lefty starter a 3rd time, that's when we'll finally break through. Assumption doesn't work in the postseason because a lot of starters don't go a 3rd time through the order in the postseason. And when you look at the right-handed bats who were in the lineup yesterday, if I read this out right, Ronald Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley combined to go 0-11 against Sean Manaea. It's not like he was dominant coming into the game. 4.52 ERA entering yesterday. And he's been better recently, but he's not been shut out the Braves through 5 and change better recently. And so this kind of becomes a twofold question. One, how much improvement do you think that Sean Murphy and maybe Ha-Seong Kim can add against left-handed pitching? I said it yesterday. I'll say it again. Sean Murphy has not been good at the plate in a little while. Hit under 200 last year. That being said, against lefties specifically last year, 123 WRC plus. So even if you go to the most charitable assumptions about his performance based on what we saw last year, and don't assume that he's at all better after the hip injury's healed. It looks like a guy where he's going to be behind the plate against lefties, and he should be able, maybe the batting average isn't there, but he should be able to give you power production against left-handed hitting or left-handed pitching. So you have that aspect of it, right? You're going to get him. And when you look at Sean Murphy in Gwinnett this year, doing this rehab stuff, he had 3 hits and caught all 7 innings in the first game of the doubleheader for Gwinnett yesterday. And that's following, he had 2 hits on Sunday as well. One of those hits yesterday was like 106 off the bat, right? I still think adding him to the lineup, and we don't know how long it's going to be. It could be after the trade deadline, could be before, we don't know. I do think adding him is definitely going to be something that will help against lefties. I think even if you don't think he's going to improve on hitting around 200, which I personally, if you look at the early in seasons, before that hip continues to degenerate, you can look and you can see Sean Murphy's not been bad in some of those situations, in those splits, those early season plate appearances before that hip becomes a serious problem. Based on everything I've heard, the sports medicine surgeon I talked to about how severe that hip injury it was, right? Or a typical hip injury like that was, and how it degenerates throughout the course of a season if you try to play on it. I'm choosing to believe that maybe we don't see the 300 hitter we saw in the first half of 2023, but that we probably see something better than a 199 average from Sean Murphy when he comes back. I'm choosing to believe that. Not everybody will, and that's fine. It's possible that Ha-Seong Kim could also give you a little bit of a boost against lefties. His rehab assignment expires after Saturday. So on Sunday morning, Atlanta needs to make a decision to trade him, DFA him, put him on the Major League roster. Those are your 3 options with Ha-Seong Kim on Sunday. Remember, trade deadline's on Monday. So they've got to figure out what to do there with him. When he's been healthy, which he wasn't healthy for most of last year, clearly wasn't healthy for this year. When he's been healthy, he's been an above average hitter against lefties. That 2024 season, the one that everybody points to and says, oh, he wasn't actually that good, right? He was a 101 WRC plus guy. 2023 is the one where he was a 110 WRC plus, looked like he could be a dude, right? But 2024, when he was a 101 WRC plus overall, before he went down with that shoulder injury that really has kind of messed up 2 years of his career now, he had a 109 against lefties. In 2023, again, the year where everybody points to when they show when he's fully healthy and good to go, what he can be, he had that 110 overall WRC plus against lefties. He had a 146 a 110 overall, 146 against lefties. He's been a guy that has hit lefties better than righties. So theoretically, you have a little bit of help coming, right? You have a little bit of reinforcements coming. But I don't think it's enough. And let's talk about investing in the offense and not just the pitching staff, and maybe what you need to do there and what that would look like. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, this episode's brought to you by our friends at IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom-infused coffees are the tasty, low-sugar brain and body fuel that you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack's a great way to try all of the IQ Bar products and flavors. You get 9 IQ bars, 8 IQ Mix sticks, and 4 IQ Joe sticks. And all IQ Bar products are clean label certified
and entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. With over 20,000 five-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are fueling their busy lifestyles with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom infused coffees. And the Ultimate Sampler Pack includes all three. Right now, IQ Bar is offering Braves Today listeners 20% off of all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details.
Special shout out to our friends there at IQ Bar. That ad campaign's wrapping up the end of this month. Tomorrow's probably the last ad you'll see for IQ Bar for a little while. So if you want to use that promo code, go ahead and get it now. Quick preview. I want to do a little bit of a pitching nerd dump on AJ Smith-Shawver in the third segment. What I saw yesterday, digging into some of the numbers, both last night and this morning, and talking about going like what changed for him yesterday from last year and what to take out of that start. So we'll do that in the third segment. But here, I'm trying to figure out, we know we're going to add pitching, right? We know Atlanta needs to add a number 2 starter. You probably need to add a veteran number 3 as well. Right, Michael Wacha makes a ton of sense. Guys like that, somebody who can eat innings in the regular season and be an option for you in the postseason. You can't pencil. I don't think you can write Michael Wacha into a start in pen. Never mind chisel him into stone like you would with Chris Sale. But we know you need to add that. But offense, I still think you need to find a bat at the deadline, and I still think it probably should be a guy who hits lefties. The thing that I believe it was Jake, asked me about this on the postcast last night. I don't specifically think the Braves need to find a third baseman. Now, saying that, I'm not saying that Austin Riley was good. He was a problem yesterday. He was 0 for 7 with 6 strikeouts across the 2 games. And I think it's time. I think we're getting to the point where production has to start outweighing patience, right? Yesterday was the 2/3 mark of the season, if I remember that stat right from the broadcast. They've given Austin Riley plenty of time to get right. And I'm not saying you cut Austin Riley. I'm not saying you dump him at the deadline. I'm not anti-Austin Riley. But I'm at the point of one of the side effects of getting an outfield bat that you feel more comfortable with getting playing time over the Eli White, Mike Yastrzemski platoon is the ability to take Mauricio Dubon and put him at third base. I'm not saying you permanently bench Austin Riley for the rest of the year. But what I am saying is you've given him plenty of time to show that he can, to let him get out of this slump. And he's so far not done it. And so because he hasn't done it, and because he is still having pretty awful at-bats like he did yesterday, I was hopeful the mental break after the All-Star break would have been enough, and it clearly was not. We need to now look at taking that playing time down the stretch and giving it to somebody who's performing better. And when you get to the postseason, they're not going to leave him off the roster. They won't leave him off the postseason roster. But we've hit the point where Austin Riley can't be written on the lineup card in ink anymore, right? They bumped him down to 8. If that doesn't tell you anything about how they feel about Austin Riley's production, I don't know what will. And so I think if you add that outfielder, that's another advantage. And you can get Dubon at third. If you get a guy who hits lefties, all of a sudden, depending on if Kim or Jarvis or whoever ends up being the shortstop, and this does require one of those two to be able to hold it down. You can't play Dubon at third base without either Jarvis or Kim holding down short. Maybe it's the platoon of those guys. I don't know. Maybe if you add 2 guys, one of them probably replaces Dom Smith. You're really in a bind here as far as your bench and how many spots you can do. If you add Murphy back to the lineup, if you add Kim and if you add an outfielder, you have to move on from 3 current members of the roster. And some of that is somewhat easy, right? You can move on from Dom Smith. You can move on from Joey Bart if you want to. I'd rather keep Joey Bart. I'd rather have a third catcher so that you can play Baldwin at DH a lot and let Sean Murphy be behind the plate. Probably depends on how much Sean Murphy's hitting. Do you move on from Jorge Mateo? If you add that outfielder, do you move on from Eli White? Do you hope that somebody gets hurt and goes on the IL until rosters expand in September? We got to find out what happens. But I do think you need to add offense. And the question that I was asked on the radio was, do you feel better or worse about the idea of investing in this roster? The fact that you have offensive questions, and the fact you have rotation questions, and the fact you kind of have a little bit of a bullpen question right now too. Does that make you more inclined to invest? Or do you feel like there's enough holes where even if you throw some stuff at it, you're not going to be able to fix this roster, and so you're less inclined to invest? And I think my answer is I'm more inclined to invest. And let me explain what I'm talking about. Because if you look back at the way this season has gone for the Braves, and if you look at month by month, and I'm grouping March and April together because it's such a small sample size, right? The Braves looked like the best team in baseball in March and April. They were juggernauts. 22-10. Run differential was +6. I'm doing math in my head real quick. +66 was the run differential in March and April. And that's when the offense was clicking. That's when the pitching staff, the rotation, was arguably over-exceeding. They were outproducing the peripherals, and the bullpen was as locked down as we thought it would be. Best team in baseball. They looked unbeatable in March and April. In May, they were still good. They were 18-10. The win-loss, the winning percentage was pretty close to what you got in March and April. The run differential was healthy. It was like +43. The pitching staff had taken a small step back. They were still better than average, but they weren't world beaters anymore. In June, everything was awful. The pitching was awful. The offense was awful. The bullpen was giving up stuff. You got outscored by 23 runs, and you went 9-14. You were 5 games below 500 there. And so far in July, you're 14-11. You're +10. The offense has been good. The pitching has been bad. You still have a winning record. You're still with a positive run differential. And I actually think your run differential says you probably should be like 15-10 and not 14-11. But the point is, we've seen what this team's ceiling is with everything working right. And I would argue that right there tells me, one, it's worth investing in this roster. This roster has shown that when things are going well, they can win the whole thing. We were talking about this team as a World Series contender in March and April, and a lot of the negative Nancy's and the folks who just don't want to believe, the fans who don't want to believe in the Braves, they were pretty quiet in the months of March and April because Atlanta was putting up so many runs, the pitching was locked down, and they were just steamrolling opponents. We've seen the ceiling. And the good news is, outside of how many postseason starters you have, and we'll get to AJ Smith-Shawver in a minute, because I think he can help you out there. There's some work to do. You need to make improvements, but none of this is glaring, right? This is not like you're Philly right now, and you have to bring in 4 hitters to get this offense to average. That's not where Atlanta is. You have track records of just about all of these guys working out. This season, you've seen it this season. Or it's guys like Ronald Acuna Jr. who have the track record to believe that, hey, when they get hot, they're going to also end up being world beaters. So you can make an addition. You can bring in a bat that can play the outfield, that lets Dubon have time at third. You can bring Sean Murphy back. And all of a sudden now, you've added 2 or 3 spots in that right-handed hitting group that should be able to take care of lefties, of lefty pitchers. You still have Matt Olson. You still have Drake Baldwin. You still Michael Harris. You still have some of these studs who are playing like studs. And one of the bigger weaknesses, the 2 biggest weaknesses in the lineup, from an offensive perspective, it's third base and left field. In at least some situations, putting Dubon at third, bringing in that trade acquisition for left, you've taken care of the 2 biggest weaknesses in the lineup. It's smaller moves that have outsized results. It's the same for you go out and you get, let's say you get 1 more high leverage bullpen arm because Robert Suarez apparently has fallen into the black hole of no injury updates. You get 1 more high leverage arm and that bumps everybody down a spot. It's the same theory AA was talking about with the impact starter thing, right? It bumps everybody down 1 spot, which means that you not only make, let's say you make the 7th inning better. If we assume, and I don't want to do that right now, if we assume Robert Suarez is back for the 8th, and it's Iglesias and Suarez, if this guy, if you think he's better than Dylan Lee, or even if he's not, he bumps everybody back 1 lower leverage inning than they're doing right now, right? You add Suarez, again, hopefully, at this point, apparently, you add Suarez, you add this arm. It's an incremental, and it's 1 player, but it's made so many bullpen roles that much better. Right? That's why I'm more inclined to invest in this roster after seeing some of these struggles. Because it feels like small improvements here and there can have significant payoffs on the back end. So that's what I'm thinking about on this. In just a minute, let's talk about AJ Smith-Shawver, what he did yesterday. 1, let me answer the logistics on how they were able to make him the 27th man, and then let's talk about a data dump of what he did, what's different versus when he pitched last year, and what to expect from him going forward. Pitching nerds, stick around. We'll be right back. Final segment of Braves today, Lindsey Crosby. Let's talk AJ Smith-Shawver, right? 4 1/3 innings, 4 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts, 69 pitches. Some things to like here, some things not to like here, some thoughts about how this is going to work. First, the thing to not like about this was he struggled to miss bats. He finished with 2 whiffs. 2. And a lot of that came because they just were not chasing. He got, for the outing, 18% chase rate. And all of it was on the 4-seam fastball. They didn't chase a single splitter. They didn't chase a single curveball. Nothing. Just the 4-seamer. And a lot of that was him, I felt at times, missing arm side. And so it would end up running in a little bit. Or it would be top rail where you normally throw a 4-seam fastball, right? And he had great velo. The velo was absolutely there in this one. Kind of sitting average 97. And last year he was averaging 95 in his starts. Now he did fall back to 96.5 in the 4th and the 5th. But even 96.5 is a full mile an hour up from last season. So the velo's good. The shape's still not great. The shape's never been great. It's going to kind of come down to a location issue for AJ. He's got to be able to consistently throw it upper third of the zone. And he doesn't have to hit exact locations, right? He just has to be able to keep it elevated and keep it in that shadow up. Right? If you remember the conversation, this is just a quick aside, on attack zones. There's the heart of the plate, which is just square, 100% strikes, middle of the zone. There's the shadow, which is half the edge of the zone, half out of the zone, right? It's like a ball and a half width in each direction from the edge of the strike zone. and then there's the chase, and then there's the waste, right? So shadow zone, if he can keep it a ball and a half on either side of the top edge of the strike zone, that's where the four-seam fastball is going to be best. And again, the velo is there. The shape isn't amazing, but the velo's there. So you feel good about that. He didn't throw a ton of again, it's classified as a slider. I've been told it's a cutter. And so when you look at the velo on it and you say, hey, the velo, he was throwing it 86.9 or so last year. He's throwing it 90, 91 this year. It's important to point out it is a cutter. So that's part of the reason why the velo's up. You can see the lack of drop. You can see the lack of horizontal movement on it, right? It's a fastball style cutter, okay? He didn't throw very many of those. Also didn't throw very many sinkers, right? I think he threw 4 of them yesterday, 95 and change on the velo there. Didn't have that shape at all last year, so that's really nice as well. The key to this whole thing is the splitter, right? And the thing on the splitter, yesterday, 3 inches of vertical break, it moved about 13 to 14 inches to the arm side. And that's pretty much what you would expect a splitter from a righty to do as far as arm angle and things like that, right? So that is, the movement itself isn't that unusual. It is harder with more drop than what he got last year. So I think that's the big takeaway from this, is the movement profile isn't anything right now unusual from what you would normally see from a righty splitter, from a guy that's throwing with that kind of same arm slot, right? He's sitting there in the mid 40s on an arm slot, so pretty much a true 3/4. But we saw how good it was last year, and this arguably has more movement. The big takeaway here is a lot of these pitches, whether it's the cutter instead of a slider, whether it is the curveball, whether it's the splitter, whatever, the pitch shape on a lot of these are better. The shapes are better shapes than he was throwing last year. And we saw before he got hurt last year how effective he was at those shapes. So you take the guy you saw last year, you give him better pitch shapes, you can see how this is going to result in good outcomes for the Braves. The downside with his start yesterday, and I kind of touched on it earlier, just his inability to get ahead of batters. There wasn't a lot of chase it wasn't any chase on any non-fastball. He only threw first pitch strikes to 9 of 20 batters. And on the four-seamer, it was only 3 out of 10. And the splitter was in the zone a lot, which is not typically where he wants to leave it. And I think honestly, some of this is just, and every pitcher does this, and if they tell you they don't, they're lying. Some of this was just the adrenaline of being on a field with a third deck again. Every pitcher deals with that. If they tell you that they don't, they're lying to you. I think some of it was just the adrenaline. You combine the adrenaline with the fact that the splitter has different movement than last year. He wasn't in the zone. He was in the zone too much with the splitter and not in the zone enough with anything else. But I think going forward, you're going to be able to see him. I am hopeful that you will see him eventually get to the point where we do consider him to be a postseason starter. I'm not saying you can approach the Monday's deadline assuming that he will. I do think that would be a mistake. And AA explicitly said when it came to Spencer Schwellenbach, they weren't going to do that. He said they didn't know on AJ Smith-Shawver. I am of the opinion you cannot act like AJ Smith-Shawver is your number 3 right now. But I do think he can get there. And if you look at what he did last year and the way that he eased into the season last year, you can see a very similar kind of thing like this. First start of the year last year against San Diego on the road, 4 innings, 2 runs, strikes out 4. Then versus Miami at home, 3 runs, and 4 2/3. Then he gets a 5 innings, a 2-run ball against Tampa with 7 strikeouts. Then he goes to Colorado and dominates because Splitter doesn't care, the air's thinner. 2 runs on 5 1/3. And then he comes home that 5th start of the year. 8 scoreless, 1 hit, 5 strikeouts versus Cincinnati. Took him a couple starts to keep ramping up, and then bam. And you're at the point now where you've got the month of August to be that ramp up. He wasn't a liability in any of those outings. Now, Atlanta didn't win either of his first 2 starts. They also didn't score a single run either of his first 2 starts. But he allowed 2 runs, 3 runs, 2 runs, 2 runs. He was never a liability last year, opening the season. And then as he was getting into his form, getting comfortable with controlling everything and how to use it, I will also say, if I remember right, he was throwing to Sean Murphy quite a bit last year. I need to double check that to confirm. But I do believe he was throwing to Murphy a bit. And this is all small sample size, so we don't know how effective this is, right? We don't know how exact this is. But 5 starts with Sean Murphy behind the plate, 2.36 ERA. 3 starts with Drake Baldwin behind the plate, 6.59. Now, that's going to be heavily influenced by the blow-up he had against Washington, which in retrospect looked like it was the start of the arm issues and then coming out the next game. But the point is, and I'll continue to just beat this drum into the ground until people agree with me here, Sean Murphy is a fantastic game caller. He has a natural feel for how to navigate a pitcher through an outing and deploy them in their pitches to the maximum effectiveness. Drake Baldwin's not bad at it, but he's not explicitly good at it either. Sean Murphy is amazing at this. There are not many catchers in baseball from a purely who do I want to catch this guy in an elimination game that I would rather see behind the plate than Sean Murphy. And so AJ Smith-Shawver working his way back, Sean Murphy working his way back. You're going to be able to see, I'm convinced, by the end of the season, you're going to see AJ Smith-Shawver ripping that splitter, ripping that curveball for chase, for whiffs, going top shelf with the fastball and blowing it past dudes, and you're going to say, this is a postseason starter for Atlanta. You saw flashes of it yesterday. We're not there yet. And I don't think you can approach the deadline assuming or just pencil or just writing him in pen as the number 3 starter. But I do think you can probably go get a postseason starter as your number 2, a Casey Mize or whatever. And then your number 3 could be somebody like a Michael Wacha, who has additional control, by the way. I want to point that out. Has additional control, is a veteran. And then the plan as of now, and probably what they would say if they were asked, would be AJ's your number 4 for the postseason. And by the time we get to the postseason, you're going to flop those guys. And you're going to make AJ the 3. Saw a lot of stuff I liked yesterday. Really think that this is going to be that as he continues to get into midseason form. He wasn't rushed back yesterday. He had plenty of time, but pitchers generally, they don't peak their first appearance in the majors. They continue to get better throughout the year. Sales talked about it. Strider's talked about it. The goal is not to be the best version of yourself in game 1. The goal is to be the best version of yourself the last game before the postseason. AJ's going to get there, and I'm confident that he can and be a difference maker in the postseason based on what I saw yesterday. That'll do it for Braves today for Thursday, July 30th. Still trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do for the trade deadline. I'm probably going to be a bunch of shorter breaking news recaps as they happen. Thinking tomorrow we do some sort of kind of big preview and we say, hey, starting pitchers, here's everything we know as of Friday morning. Relievers, here's everything we know as of Friday morning. Offensive improvements, here's everything we know as of Friday morning. And try to talk about the guys that would work best. Probably what we're going to end up doing. Let me know if you have any specific ideas as to how you want me to cover the trade deadline from a preview perspective. And then we'll be back next week. We'll have the normal Monday morning episode to recap the weekend and talk about that day's deadline. It's an off day, thankfully. And then I've got a special guest coming by for Tuesday's episode to break down what Atlanta actually does and doesn't do and what AA says about it. And that'll be in your feed sometime on Tuesday. That'll do it for Braves Today. Please like the video. Please subscribe both here and on the newsletter, bravestoday.com. And until next time, this has been Braves Today.